Mis Harbors. Jason was the oldest of five children in our family, and perhaps that is what determined my fate from the beginning. Our house, located in a quiet village with narrow streets and green fields, was full of laughter and joy. My childhood was spent within these cozy walls where every corner was steeped in memories. My mother, Ellen, was a homemaker who gave her all to us children. She knew how to create comfort and warmth, and her laughter filled the house with happiness. My father, Richard, was a strict but fair man who always emphasized the importance of work and responsibility. He often said, "You have to earn everything in life with your own hands." These words became a motto for me that has accompanied me throughout my life. When my siblings, Emily, Joshua, Luke, and Sarah, were growing up, I couldn't help but notice how much my parents spoiled them. Emily, for example, always got the prettiest dresses and toys. As a child, she was a princess that everyone admired. Joshua was passionate about sports, and his parents bought him everything he needed for his hobby, from the latest soccer balls to sports clothes. Luke was interested in science from an early age, and they bought him expensive textbooks and chemistry sets. Sarah was the youngest and the favorite, and she got everything she wanted, no questions asked. And me? I was told I had to learn how to earn my own money. I was the example for the younger ones, and I was the one with the highest expectations. I remember walking into my parents' house one day holding a promotional brochure for a new video game I had been dreaming about. My heart was pounding in my chest because it was more than just a toy. It was my dream. "Mom, Dad, can I have this game?" I asked hopefully. My mom looked at me with a slight smile, and my dad, frowning slightly, said, "Jason, you're an adult now. It's time to realize that in life you have to work to achieve something. Gaming isn't a necessity, it's a luxury. If you want it, you have to earn it yourself." At that moment, I felt something inside me break. I realized that for my siblings, those words would never have been spoken. They didn't need to earn money for their toys and hobbies, but I was the oldest, and that was my burden. As the years went by, this injustice, which I first felt then, only got worse. My life became more and more stressful, and my role as the oldest brother became more and more difficult. When I graduated high school and entered college, my parents offered me no financial aid. They thought I was old enough to manage on my own. College was in another city, and life there was much more expensive than I could have imagined. I tried to study and work, but even still, the money was barely enough to rent a small dorm room and food. There was no time for entertainment or extracurricular activities. I spent every minute working and studying. The contrast between my life and the lives of my siblings became more and more apparent. When Joshua went to college, his parents paid his tuition and rented him an apartment near campus. He knew no worries about money. His time was completely devoted to his studies and sports. Luke followed in his footsteps and was also provided with financial support that allowed him to focus on his dream of becoming a scientist. Emily continued to get everything she wanted and more. Her parents started saving for her future wedding, which she had dreamed of since childhood. All the while, I continued to fight for my place in the sun. When my college life came to an end and I received my diploma, my parents offered me no help to start a new chapter of life. They believed I was strong and smart enough to make it on my own. I took a job in a big city where housing prices were exorbitant. The salary, though steady, barely covered my basic needs. I tried to hang on, but a few months after I started working, my financial situation became critical. I found myself on the verge of being evicted from my apartment because I could not pay the rent on time. In desperation, I turned to my parents, hoping for their support for the first time in years. I thought they would see how hard I was struggling and decide to help. "Mom, Dad, I'm in a lot of trouble. Can I count on your help?" I asked hopefully over the phone. The answer was like a hammer to my heart. Jason, we understand that this is hard for you, but we don't have the ability to help you right now. You're strong, you'll get through this. You always have. Those words echoed in my head long after that conversation. I realized that I was alone again, that I would have to fight these difficulties on my own. Soon I was evicted from my apartment and found myself on the street. I had to spend several weeks in a homeless shelter where every day seemed like a struggle for survival. I lived in fear, not knowing what would happen next. Salvation came from a friend of mine who was also in a difficult situation. He offered me to rent together a small, shabby apartment on the outskirts of the city. The place was far from ideal, but it gave me a roof over my head and a chance to gradually rebuild my life. While I was trying to get my life together, my siblings continued to receive support and care from my parents. Emily finally got engaged to her lover, and my parents happily announced that they were willing to pay for her wedding. But they didn't stop there. They announced that they were going to set aside money for all of their children's weddings. All of these events reawakened old wounds in me. When I married Kate, we struggled to raise money for a small ceremony. My parents didn't offer us any help, even though we didn't ask for it. But the realization that they were willing to spend large sums of money on my siblings' weddings left me with a bitter sense of injustice. Kate and I went on with our lives, relying only on our own strength, building our lives one step at a time. As the years passed, I became successful in my career. I became what my parents had always hoped I would be, successful and independent. But inside me, I still had those wounds from my childhood and adolescence. I still felt alienated from my family, despite all my accomplishments. And then, out of the blue, I received a call from my parents. Their voice was full of anxiety, asking to meet. When Kate and I arrived at their house, I immediately sensed that something was wrong. The house that had always seemed like a fortress to me now looked depressed and abandoned. My parents were worried and agitated. "Jason, we're in trouble," my father began, trying to find the words. "We need your help." They told me that their financial situation had deteriorated dramatically. All their previous stability had been lost, and now they were on the verge of bankruptcy. They asked for my help, expecting that I, as their son, was obliged to support them in their time of need. I looked at them and couldn't believe what I was hearing. These same people had once refused to help me when I was on the streets. I remembered those nights in the shelter when I thought no one wanted me. And now they were asking me for support, as if they'd forgotten all those years when I'd been second nature to them. "You never helped me," I said, trying to keep my emotions in check. "When I needed you, you turned away. Why should I help you now?" My parents were shocked by my answer. They couldn't understand why I was saying that, why I didn't want to help. "Jason, we've always been there for you," Mom said. "We could have helped if we'd known how bad it was. You should have told us." I pulled out my phone and showed them screenshots of messages asking for their help when I was on the verge of homelessness. In those messages was all my pain, all my desperation. But all I got in response was cold denials. My parents dismissed my evidence as if it meant nothing. "We're still your parents, Jason," my father continued. "And you're the most balanced of all our kids. You can afford it. It's your duty." My words provoked a storm of indignation, not only from my parents, but from my siblings as well. They couldn't believe I was refusing to help our parents, accusing me of selfishness and cruelty. "You have to help, Jason," they told me. "It's wrong to leave your parents in trouble." But none of them knew how I felt all those years ago. No one understood what it was like to always be in the background, to always be the one left unsupported. My life changed after that conversation. I felt the weight that had been weighing on my shoulders for years finally begin to lift. I realized that I didn't have to live up to anyone's expectations, especially if those expectations always put me last. I focused on my life, on my relationship with Kate, on our family. I stopped looking for approval where there was never any. Yes, my family found itself divided, but I knew I had done what I felt was right. My parents may never understand my decision, and my siblings will probably never forgive me for refusing to help. But I accepted it as inevitable. I chose myself and my happiness because I realized no one else would. You can't change the past, but you can choose to move forward. And I chose to move forward, leaving behind all the hurt and disappointment. It was my path, and I knew it was the right one. Love audio stories about people's lives and destinies? Subscribe to my channel where new stories appear daily. Each of them is a piece of someone else's experience that can inspire and make you think. Share the channel with your friends and open the world of amazing stories for them.